15 minutes later in the ardent desert, Da-un and Dongmin pushed hard ahead. The man, dripping with sweat, turned to the boy, claiming that it was much harder than he had assumed. Dongmin admitted he was right, saying he must have misheard something. His feet were sinking into the sand, making it difficult for him to walk. The boy also noted that a salt desert wouldn't be in such a place, which Da-un denied. In his opinion, the problem lay in the method, not the information itself. The man installed the gate, then ordered the surprised boy to move away. Da-un's army of golems emerged from the magical passage. Da-un and Dongmin boarded the elephant. The boy was delighted with the transport golem. However, he knew that this was their last day together. Da-un assured him, however, that everything would be fine, as he had trained him well. The man liked Dongmin very much. If not for the fact that they had different things to do, it would have been fun to stay together. The pleasant moment was interrupted by the rabbit communicating with Da-un telepathically. The man asked how his scouting was going, but unfortunately the rodent was unable to find anything. Da-un asked him to endure the heat, because it is impossible to build an observatory on sandy ground. Besides, no good would come of it if Dongmin saw him. However, if he was very tired, Da-un suggested that he sit on the golem and rest for a while. The rabbit sat on the elephant's head, wondering what the salt was that he had to go through all this. In addition, he was starting to get dizzy. They rode ahead like this until finally, White Rabbit saw something. The rodent rubbed his eyes, for he thought he was starting to get delusions. In his line of sight was a herd of camels and scorpions. They were all heading in one direction. The White Rabbit spoke telepathically to Da-un, urging him to look outside. Da-un and Dongmin were surprised. As soon as they left the golem, they saw a salt desert. They also received an achievement as they managed to find it. While Da-un wondered why he received an achievement for something like this, Dongmin was simply delighted. The man telepathically teased Rabbit, asking him if he, by any chance, already knew about it, comparing him to the baboon, but the rabbit said he didn't. The boy dipped his finger in the salt and then lifted it to his mouth, and it was real salt. Delighted, the boy asked if they would have a race in extracting the salt, but noticed that Da-un had already started extracting with his skills. After a while, the man said that was enough. The salt they found, together with the oil sauce and leaves, would make a perfect combination. Tonight, they will have Dongmin's farewell party. The White Rabbit, on the other hand, couldn't believe that they had ventured this far just for something like this. Da-un placed 2 blocks of salt in front of Dongmin, declaring that it was his portion. The man reached out his hand and stroked the boy's head, saying that it was all thanks to him and he was very grateful. Momentarily, a yellow light flashed from Dongmin's head, and there was a message that the requirement had been fulfilled. Da-un asked Alpha what it was about, and he replied that it was a great achievement, to help the temple owner and to impress him on top of that. His achievement has been recognized and he qualifies as a dragon apostle. The White Rabbit interfered in the conversation, landing on the ground, scaring the boy in the process. The rodent pointed a finger at the boy, telling him to shut up. Da-un, however, put his hand on the animal's face and continued asking about the achievement awarded to Dongmin. Alpha confirmed that Da-un had been moved by the boy's behavior already a while back. It was a kind of small-scale qualification test, but it was similar to the dragon test that Da-un went through earlier. The man asked if there was a chance that if Dongmin became a dragon apostle, he could visit the dragon temple. Dongmin, however, didn't qualify to that extent. Da-un, therefore, didn't understand what good came from this achievement in such a case. Alpha claimed that it was a good thing in general, and would especially benefit Da-un himself. It turned out that while the man would be busy with other things, Dongmin could collect life energy on his behalf. This meant that the boy could also make offerings, and in Alpha's estimation, Da-un was too lazy to do so anyway. The man stated that after all, he goes out hunting once in a while anyway, but Alpha quickly corrected him, claiming that he was doing it all for himself anyway, in order to benefit from the temple's power, and after all, the real reason for the temple's existence is to resurrect Lord Earthia. Da-un changed the subject and, pointing his finger at Dongmin, asked what benefit the boy would have. Alpha countered that the mere opportunity to serve Lord Earthia was honor enough, which for Da-un still seemed useless. The White Rabbit began to reassure him by saying that it's not so useless after all, since he can make sacrifices just like them. He also pointed out the boy's skills. The skill of a food god made stats double when Dongmin's satiety was at 100%. Since he had become a dragon's apostle, he would be able to exceed this amount, and if this happened, the duration of the food god skill would increase significantly. The boy was perplexed and didn't quite understand what they were talking about. Da-un quickly explained to him that he would be able to eat even if he was full. The man noted that the method of marking should be the same as that of the rabbit, so he appointed him as a dragon apostle. Dongmin felt power overflowing through him. The boy put his hand to his face, claiming that he felt extremely strong. Dongmin was extremely overjoyed with his new title. Da-un stated telepathically that the boy simply had 8th grade syndrome. Rabbit, however, didn't know what it was. The man then explained that it was something one could get at that age. Dongmin's moments of joy, however, were interrupted by the scorpions surrounding them. The boy asked Da-un what they should do. The man scratched his head, stating after a moment that it was a final exam. Dongmin was shocked by this information. The fact that he had to face dozens of scorpions alone terrified him. Da-un referred to this, stating that he only had to be careful of the poison. In the back of his mind, he knew that he could cleanse the poison if anything happens. The man summoned an elephant, then jumped on the golem's head, stating that watching such a fight required a special place. The rabbit also joined him. Trying to give Dongmin encouragement, they stated that after all, he was a dragon apostle. Besides, scorpions were weak, and if they stung him, he wouldn't die right away. This information, however, did not comfort him at all. Da-un threw the iron rod at the boy's feet, reminding him to always stick to his weapon, even if he was afraid. The boy began to recall what Da-un had taught him, the reason he needed to become stronger. It was a situation in which he fell to his knees, letting the weapon out of his hand, claiming that he could no longer train. He didn't understand why he had to train so hard. Da-un was standing next to him at the time, well aware that it was difficult, but convinced him that he had to do it. He was able to do it. The reason is to survive at all costs and return home. Dongmin clenched his hand on the rod, shouting these words with shine in his eyes. Da-un complimented him. The boy charged at the beast, then performed a slide, falling to his knees, thus avoiding the scorpion's sting. Dongmin then jumped into the air and slaughtered the first opponent. Da-un gave advice towards the boy not to forget to control his satiety. He also hinted to him that one of the scorpions was targeting his back. Dongmin had to eat while fighting. The boy quickly ate and dealt with another opponent. The white rabbit noticed that Da-un was taking care of the kid, but after a while, he noticed that the man was holding a big pot in his hands, which used to be a trap in the temple. Dongmin fought better than Da-un expected, plus, looking at those claws, he just couldn't sit still. He was going to cook the scorpions. The white rabbit wondered who the hell this man even was. Meanwhile, Dongmin bravely resisted the beasts, holding pieces of meat in his mouth. The boy was fighting using an iron rod, preventing the pincers from approaching and cutting off the limb of the beast. Da-un ordered his deputy to collect it all. As a precaution, the man cleansed the pincers with his skill, making the necessary preparations. The scorpions surrounding the boy were, in his mind, extremely persistent. After a while, a very pleasant smell reached his nostrils. He looked over to see where it was coming from, at which point he saw a rabbit fanning the boiling meat with a leaf and sitting next to Da-un, who was shouting at him to hurry. The rodent was stirring the oil and salt, asking the man if he was sure it would taste good. Da-un was convinced of this, but since the rabbit didn't believe him, he recommended that in that case, he should give it a try. Dongmin was sad that Da-un was eating the delicious stuff himself. He also wanted to eat, and in saying this, he smashed the head of one of the scorpions. Da-un marveled at the perfectly cooked pincers, which he thought looked like a giant lobster, then began to rush the boy by announcing that if he didn't hurry, they would eat everything without him. The boy felt the blood boiling in his veins. He decided that the hordes of scorpions would not survive. Dongmin smashed all the opponents, thus passing the test, and sat down to a delicious meal with Da-un and Rabbit. In the evening in the Forest of Origins, Da-un informed Dongmin that there should be participants nearby whom he could join. As a parting gift, the man presented the boy with a warm covering made of animal skin. Dongmin was extremely grateful, and with tears in his eyes, thanked him for all the help he had received. Da-un told him not to cry, and that he would soon understand how valuable the soda he had given him was. The boy said goodbye to Da-un and slowly moved ahead. The man followed him with his eyes, hoping that they would meet again someday. Dongmin joined the other players. Mountains of Death. Dragon Temple. Da-un asked Pokyu if everything was okay. The squirrel answered him with enthusiasm. The man lay on the ground with the rabbit, remembering Dongmin. He was sorry that he had to part ways with the boy, but also said, "There is no place like home." The rabbit was surprised that the man called the temple his home, but for Da-un, it was just an expression. The Pokyu jumped onto Da-un's chest. The man noticed that his squirrel friend had become fat. Alpha suggested that Da-un take care of the temple as if it was his own home. Da-un began to ponder his words, stroking the squirrel, eventually concluding that it was time for some housework. Alpha had some thoughts after observing his new master. Da-un, the man who became the new owner of the temple, might not have been some very unusual person. However, if he inherited the temple simply by chance, it could also have been destiny. So Alpha just waited. Da-un touched the wall, looking at the trap that fired the arrows, and then the trap with the oil pot. It was very unusual for Da-un to pay attention to the temple's traps. The man asked Alpha if he used the reset skill on this trap. The pot would fill with oil again. The administrator replied that it most likely would. Da-un then ordered Rabbit to bring that thing. Rodin obeyed the order and brought the heavy thing, thus earning the right to eat meat. Alpha watched him, trying to understand what the man was up to. Da-un's plan was simple. Step 1, fill a clean, empty pot with oil. Step 2, use the skill of installing traps. Step 3, remove the oil and use the trap reset skill. Alpha thought Da-un had been praiseworthy until now. It turned out that it wasn't a trap at all, but merely an infinite oil machine. Alpha couldn't take it anymore and exploded. The scene changes to the Stage 1 area. A baboon was walking through the forest. Bosses were not the only ones whose numbers had decreased. Wild boars were also appearing decidedly less. He didn't understand what was going on. When it comes to life energy, one prefers quality over quantity. It is more effective to kill survivors after training them first. Those who didn't have to fight to clear the first stage are useless. He had to take some action. White Rabbit walked along the forest path, kicking a stone and clenching his paws into fists. He wondered if Da-un really thought he was a grass-eating rabbit. The rodent recalled the words of the man who, after declaring that he was going to carve the stairs, suggested that the rabbit goes to search for edible grass. But he doesn't have to force himself if he doesn't want to. He just won't be able to eat meat in the future. He was terribly upset by these words. He was pulled out of his thoughts by the sounds made by Dakmo. Crouching in the bushes, the rodent became frightened. He thought it was a baboon. The rabbit noticed that Dakmo were wielding reinforced equipment. Such items did not exist at the first stage. Then, behind his back stood a baboon in the flesh. Looking at Dakmo, he stated aloud that it was brilliant. White Rabbit was well aware of this voice. He was too busy watching the monsters and lost his alertness. The stressed rodent stood motionless, repeating to himself that it would be fine. It was then that the baboon turned his gaze away from Dakmo, noticing a pair of white ears in the bushes. The monkey reached out towards the rabbit with the intention of grabbing it. The white rabbit was terrified. He was sure he was about to die. The baboon grabbed the animal by the ears and violently jerked it upward. He was sure that he had caught the degraded guide. But after a moment, he saw that he had grabbed an ordinary rabbit. This was a special rabbit imitation skill, thanks to which the former guide managed to outwit the foul monkey. The inconsolable baboon threw the animal to the ground and walked away. The white rabbit lay motionless on the ground for a while longer, until finally, as soon as the Dakmo took an interest in him, he returned to his true form and quickly dealt with them, vowing to himself that one day he would kill the baboon. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Death Mountains, Da-un continued carving stairs. He wondered if it was because of such a thrill that people were doing extreme sports. The ostrich was watching over him. Da-un steadily walked down the cliff accompanied by the ostrich golem. This was a precautionary measure in case of an unexpected accident. The stone carving skill was at level 7. It was a reward for his hard work. Repairing the temple and making offerings was very troublesome, but the simple repetitive work suited him. And on top of that, cliff carving was quite easy. Da-un carved into the rock until finally, unexpectedly, he found himself in the area of Stage 4. The man was shocked that everything was connected in this way. It was not Stage 2, but Stage 4, and was surprisingly close to the Death Mountains. Alpha, however, didn't know what the Dragon of Death had done to this land. Da-un asked him if he thought something was wrong. The color of the mist was a little different and strange. After a while, Da-un lost consciousness and fell on the stairs. When he woke up, he saw a concerned ostrich above him. Alpha also inquired about his condition. Da-un rubbed his face with his hand, thinking about what had just happened. The administrator was relieved. Had it not been for the golem in the form of an ostrich, there could have been a real disaster. The alpha explained that the mist or cloud was mixed with a sleeping poison. Fortunately, his servant grabbed him just before Da-un fell down and quickly pulled him up to prevent a big accident. Da-un thanked the ostrich. He concluded that the poisonous cloud must have been a barrier. Who would have thought that the mist would contain poison? Suddenly, he realized something. He started rummaging in his pocket. Alpha suggested to him that maybe Da-un should return to the temple, but he was going to keep going down and tear through the sleeping dust. The man wrapped a cloth around his mouth and nose. Alpha wasn't necessarily thrilled with his idea, but Da-un used his purification skill on the material, by doing so creating a makeshift gas mask. Of course, this wasn't a decision made on the spur of the moment. Purification was one of Da-un's skills. When its level was low, he was able to accumulate experience points using poisonous mushrooms. But unfortunately, he couldn't find a way to raise the skill level even more. He couldn't improve this skill with hard work or effort alone. But just now, a huge poisonous cloud appeared in front of him. The makeshift gas mask was just a little insurance. His real goal was to clear all the poisonous clouds. Da-un used his skill on clouds, and when they were cleared, they didn't return. Clearing the poisonous clouds, carving down the cliff, and repeating these two actions. Any other person would have thought of it as hard work, but this was Da-un. Beyond the sea of clouds, which looked like an open ocean, stretched a vast land. Within a day, his skill had reached level 10. Since it was a novice level, he wondered if that meant there was also an intermediate level. The man stretched his hands toward the sky, saying that if he could only reach it, he would clear all the clouds. Birds began to fly across the sky, which Da-un felt was a very pleasant sight. Unexpectedly, one of them began to get dangerously close. It was powerful. The griffin attacked the man standing on the stairs, using its paw full of sharp claws. Da-un managed to shield himself with a block from the ground at the last moment, after which he mounted the ostrich, and they began to flee up the stairs. The predatory beast dashed in pursuit, but when it flew between the poisonous clouds, it immediately stopped. The griffin couldn't pass through them, which meant that they actually played the role of a barrier between the different stages. The beast turned around and flew away. Da-un began to wonder if Stage 4 was full of such opponents. The man began to wonder what he should do. He thought that beyond the cliff, it could be really dangerous. Intoxicated with poison, the beast landed on nearby rocks and looked down. The mighty griffin began looking at the man-made stairs. It flew up to them and started running up the stairs. Meanwhile, Da-un, who knew nothing, was still carving a path in the cliff. His stone carving skill had reached level 8, so he would be able to go down much faster. Meanwhile, in the vicinity of the Dragon Temple, White Rabbit was exhausted. He planned to talk to Da-un. He really hated these grass expeditions. Rodent considered whether his master was ever tired. The noise that reached his ears made him wonder what the strange man had come up with this time. Suddenly, a griffin took to the air, at the same time surprising the former guide. Da-un rubbed the sweat from his forehead. He was tired. The man wondered how deep he had managed to dig, and concluded that he should rest for a while. That's when the rabbit began communicating with him telepathically. He claimed that they were in trouble, and everything was about to be destroyed. Da-un asked him for a detailed explanation, to which the rabbit replied that an eagle was attacking them. Alpha intervened in the conversation and straightened out the rabbit's words, informing the man that it was the work of a griffin he had met on his path earlier. Da-un had to return immediately and stop it, because if the temple collapses, restrictions would follow. The man asked what restrictions he meant, and it was about the temple's abilities, such as magic gates. It wasn't good. The griffin was demolishing everything around it. The force of the impact on the temple pushed the rabbit away. The rodent lay on the ground, wondering if he should run away. He began to think about how Da-un was just making him do his daily chores, and how he might somehow be able to find a new place to live. After a while, however, he leaped to his feet, finding that he was talking nonsense. This was his place, his home. After a moment, Da-un's hand rested on his head. The hammer-wielding man praised him for his stirring speech, but corrected him by saying that the temple was not only rabbits, but also his home. The man ordered the golems to assemble. The army of creatures from the earth obediently surrounded him. The gazes of Da-un and Griffin met. The beast remembered the man's face perfectly, and as soon as it located him, it immediately dived. The man began placing bricks on the ground, then ordered his golems to hurl them at the griffin. Unfortunately, the bricks failed to injure the beast, although the rabbit was of a different opinion. Rodent asked if he had anything pointy, In his opinion, these were the best things against strong opponents. Da-un had metal rods in his inventory. The man activated the horned boar strength skill and threw the metal rod like a javelin. He managed to hit the enemy. The griffin got rid of the rod with one swipe of its paw. Da-un began to wonder if perhaps his strength was insufficient. What's more, he noticed that the beast got really angry this time. The griffin again began to aim at the temple. Alpha perceived that something was wrong. Da-un should be the target here, but the beast was still attacking the temple. Perhaps its target was Lord Earthia himself. Indeed, the griffin was targeting the room of the boss. The white rabbit noted that in that case, the beast must have been targeting the altar, because the altar is where all the life energy of the ruins is contained, and monsters guarding the borders instinctively crave life energy. Da-un came up with an idea. Since the griffin's destination was the boss room, in that case, he will be able to stop it. The man mounted an ostrich and rushed straight to the ruins, leaving the rabbit with the golems. Da-un started looking for something. The surprised rabbit looked at everything. He hoped that the man would do something, but in the meantime, he spun in circles on his mount. Eventually, he managed to find a fragment of one of the traps among the rubble. By this time, the griffin had managed to reach the room containing the bones of Lord Earthia, the dragon of the earth. The beast desperately wanted to get to the altar. Da-un threw a stone at the griffin's beak, drawing all its attention to himself. The enraged beast rushed at the man, and then it was stopped by vines from the potato field. The griffin began to move violently, slowly tearing off the bonds. But Da-un had expected this. The man opened his inventory and placed a piece of the trap on the field. If the beast was too far away, it would be difficult to inflict any effective damage, but at this distance the trap would work. Da-un took advantage of the reset skill. After a moment, a massive wall rose from the ground and fired dozens of arrows directly at the griffin. Alpha was impressed and praised the man's idea, claiming that he was finally proving himself worthy of being a temple master. Suddenly, the arrows stopped. Da-un was surprised. It turned out that the number of arrows wasn't infinite, and he must reset the trap again. He also noticed that in order to do this, they might not have had enough life energy. The man slowly leaned out from behind the trap, wondering if he had managed to get the griffin. Momentarily, the beast opened its eyes, screaming with fury. Da-un was surprised by his opponent's immense endurance. He also thought that he might actually die this time. The griffin swung its massive paw with the intention of crushing the man, but he managed to roll to the side, avoiding the blow. Alpha began to apologize to Lord Earthia for failing to fulfill his mission. Da-un quickly ordered him to shut up and not be dramatic, as he would simply fix everything later. The man again dodged the blow but didn't do so properly. Fortunately for him, a large paw made of earth grabbed him. It was one of his golems. The white rabbit came to help, but unfortunately it took him a while, because Da-un's army wouldn't listen to him. One of the gorillas held Da-un in his hand, while the rest of the army rushed at the griffin. The rabbit asked him if everything was all right, and the man replied that he had arrived just in time, after which he got down from the golem and ordered it to join the fight. He began to give orders and commanded golems to grab the opponent by specific limbs, while the rabbit was to retreat. All commands were perfectly obeyed. Da-un concluded that since attacks from range had failed, all that remained was a decisive blow from close range. A carved stone and a lump of earth would not work against an opponent of this caliber. The only means of attack left to him now was the power of the horned boar. He had to see if it would work against a stage 4 monster. Da-un activated his skill and jumped. No matter how strong the griffin was, it was still a living creature. He was sure that if its strength was concentrated in one place, then the attack would work. The man hit his target, but the metal rod unfortunately only twisted. Da-un was sure it was over. The griffin swung its powerful head, knocking his opponent off his feet, then devoured Da-un with a single snap of its beak. The white rabbit was heartbroken by what he had just witnessed. The metal rod fell to the ground with a loud bang. The rodent couldn't believe it. At the same moment, the griffin began to behave strangely. It broke away from the golems and flew away. The rabbit could not understand the reason for his behavior, but the fact that he flew away comforted him. And then behind his back appeared Da-un confessing that he thought he was done for. The rabbit unconsciously nodded to him and only after a moment realized that the man was alive. Rabbit stretched his paws towards him and with tears in his eyes stated that he was worried. Thank goodness Da-un was alive. White Rabbit hugged his master. He didn't possess himself of happiness. The man, on the other hand, told him to get off him so he wouldn't soil him with snot. Da-un sat with his deputy on the floor, looking at the destruction of the temple. The White Rabbit asked him how he managed to survive. The man explained that just as the griffin was about to eat him, he took something out of his inventory and put it in his mouth. It was a brick of salt. At first he thought it didn't do anything, but the beast quickly went crazy because of the salt. His luck really amazed the rabbit. However, he still didn't understand how the griffin managed to get here. So Da-un explained that the fourth stage was connected to the bottom of the cliff, and that this was where he met the griffin. The rabbit had no idea that stage 4 was below him. After all, he had never even been to the Mountains of Death before. The White Rabbit hoped that perhaps the griffin had died, but Da-un quickly disagreed, pointing out that such a strong monster wouldn't die from salt alone. Alpha noted that in that case, it might attack again. It would be good if the poisonous clouds managed to reset, but if the griffin attacks before that happens, it will be very troublesome, especially since he already knew the way and was angry. Unfortunately, they had no idea when the stage 4 reset was occurring. In that case, he will have to prepare some defensive measures, just in case Griffin returns. The first thing Da-un did to protect the temple was to reset it. In this way, most of the temple's facilities could be restored. However, he ran into a roadblock because the life energy was depleted. Da-un began to contemplate whether he should start by going hunting, but he had no idea how many sacrifices he would have to make to fix it all. The White Rabbit asked if anything other than food could also be considered a sacrifice. Alpha replied that it didn't matter if it was an animal or a plant, as long as it contained life energy. The rabbit threw out a whole bunch of items from its inventory. The enchanted weapon was enough to serve as a sacrifice, after all. It had been enhanced with life energy. Da-un asked where the rabbit got the items, and the rabbit replied that from the Dakmo. It also turned out that these were items from Stage 2, and that the baboon had brought them with him to Stage 1. Da-un raised the dagger asking how the item was enchanted. In response, he got an achievement that allowed him to check information about the items. So the man took advantage of his newly acquired skill and learned that the skill itself just came from the enchanted dagger. Da-un asked the Alpha if he could also enchant items. Unfortunately, this wasn't possible in the current situation, as the Temple Master wasn't an archmage. However, the baboon himself wasn't a magician either. He only used the dungeon system and placed his life energy on the altar. There was another altar that was also located in the Dragon Temple, but with the difference that it was the Temple of the Dragon of Death. After hearing this information, Da-un got an idea. Rabbit felt worried about his next crazy idea. The man finally declared that he was going to steal the altar. Rabbit claimed he was talking nonsense, but Alpha said there was a point to it. If that is where the temple's life energy is concentrated, then the altar is like a battery of life energy, and they will steal it to make it their own. Alpha stated that touching the altar is blasphemy, but since it is the altar of the Dragon of Death, one can turn a blind eye. Da-un asked the rabbit what he thought about all this, and the rodent knew very well that if the altar disappeared, the baboon also would be fucked, which is why it was a really great idea in his opinion. So the man assigned the rabbit a special task. The rabbit held a jug filled with oil in his paws. He poured its contents onto the grass, creating a path. He still couldn't believe he was doing this. After all, he warned Da-un that since the baboon was conjuring weapons, he would be going in and out of the temple, and they would be caught if they recklessly entered there now. The man, however, was adamant and claimed that this was what the rabbit's diversionary action was meant to prevent. The White Rabbit eventually stated that it was all the same to him after all. He was only following orders. After these words, he set fire to the oil path, thereby setting the forest ablaze. This didn't escape the attention of the baboon, who quickly moved toward the flames to see what was going on. The satisfied rabbit telepathically conveyed to Da-un that he had accomplished his task. The man sat in the underground waiting for a sign from his squirrel friend, who appeared a moment later. This meant that the baboon had left the temple. Da-un lurked in the bushes and then ran into the temple. He was completely surprised to see the altar standing in plain sight, but there was something different. Alpha explained that it was life energy, but the altar had been modified so that even non-mages could use enchantments. He was ashamed to admit it, but the Dragon of Death really did use its head. There was also the option that if only Da-un managed to gain more authority, then he also would be able to use it. It didn't escape the man's attention that Alpha was very excited. Da-un finally decided to move into action, and began digging the altar out of the ground so that he could then take it with him. He dug into the ground until he heard a strange sound. He began to wonder if the baboon was coming back, but the rabbit assured him telepathically that there was nothing to worry about. It was only the scream of a baboon that was furious. Performing arson, the rabbit assured him that the baboon was stuck, so Da-un had nothing to worry about. As soon as Da-un finished carving, he summoned the golems, which went through the gate to then carry the Death Dragon altar through it. Da-un wanted to go back, but Alpha warned him that even if he turned off the gate, the baboon would most likely notice. He should erase the magical traces to get rid of any possible trouble. When asked how to do this, he received the answer that he should destroy the ruins. Such an answer surprised him. He didn't know this side of the administrator. After all, Da-un was a master stone carver, so the destruction of the temple wouldn't be a problem. Surrounded by flames, the baboon saw from a distance that the ruins were crumbling. He immediately began to worry about the altar. As soon as he was able to reach the site, he found a pile of rubble. The furious guide let out a loud roar filled with anger, which reached the ears of the participants nearby. Among them was also Dongmin. He knew it was the guide's voice. After all, Da-un himself had warned him and told him to go slowly. He was convinced that the man had done something unimaginably amazing. Suddenly, a rabbit's head emerged from the bushes. The boy crouched by the rodent. He was afraid that others would see him. He informed him that they were almost done, so they were to move as soon as the fire died down. He also told him that some decent weapons would be dropping out now, so he was to pick them up if he saw them. And also Da-un told him not to pick up meat from the wolf or eat it, as it might make him sick. This was the end of the message he had to give him. Dongmin said it was great advice and thanked the rabbit, which brought a smile to his face. Never in his life would he have thought that he would ever commit arson, demolish ruins, and receive thanks from one of the participants. Da-un has reached the 10th level of stone carving skill. He also earned the achievement for destroying a temple. He now had 2 altars in front of him and didn't know where he should start. Alpha suggested that he starts by offering a crystal ball that contains life energy. The man wondered if he would continue to be able to use the weapon enchantment system if he did so. The manager said he could only donate half of the energy and keep the rest. Da-un picked up a crystal ball from the altar, asking if, since they had so much energy now, it would be enough to resurrect Lord Earthia. Alpha and the rabbit quickly told him that there wasn't that much of it at all. Besides, it wasn't like they were storing all the energy here. They also offer it to their superiors from time to time. Da-un didn't even notice when the rabbit showed up. Fortunately, the amount of energy they had was enough to repair the entire temple. The man placed the crystal ball on the dragon's altar and sacrificed it. The sphere started to shine with a golden light. The achievement window for destroying the ruins appeared in front of him again. He was still puzzled by the reward, which was marked with question marks. The white rabbit mocked him that even his achievement window was full of errors. Da-un rewarded him with a bump on the head. After a while, random letters began to change the order in the achievement window. A new achievement appeared in front of him. Alpha explained that the altar of death had turned into an altar of life. Thus, the altar became their property. Rabbit said this was great news because now he would be able to build another temple. Da-un asked if it mattered since they were traveling through the gates anyway, but quickly changed the subject to the crystal ball. Alpha claimed that the enchantment system should work the same as before. Da-un, however, began by repairing the temple. It was extremely tiring, and he wondered if there was any way to renew everything at once. Alpha answered him that he had to raise the level of his skill, and to do so, he had to make even more sacrifices. After some time, the temple was completely renovated. The white rabbit asked his master what he was going to do now, and also suggested that since he was a workaholic, he should just make a barbecue. Da-un, however, stated that they had to finish what they had to do before they could rest. After all, this all happened in the first place because of Griffin. The fact that Da-un ordered his golems to bring all the traps with them, however, was, in the rabbit's opinion, a bit unnecessary. The man asked Alpha if there was some magical way by which he could install all the traps at once. Alpha replied that there was such a method, but it was only for mages, and Da-un was not a mage. Da-un wondered what he could do in that case. He also pointed out that the temple was too focused on mages. Alpha deflected it, stating that they didn't always have mages. Sometimes they outsourced the installation of traps to slaves. According to Da-un's findings, the griffin came by the path he had forged in the rocks, so the traps he had placed by the cliff should be sufficient. Da-un asked the rabbit to explain the whole upgrading thing to him. According to the rabbit, upgrading is done in proportion to the number of altars, and any options can be included. However, the amount of life energy used increases with the upgrade level. Da-un decided to upgrade the arrow trap, then decided to test it. So he placed the body of a horned boar in front of the trap. As soon as the trap fired a shot, Da-un, who was watching all this from a safe distance, asked if it had managed to reach its target at all. The rabbit replied that it did. The arrows penetrated so deeply that their feathers couldn't be seen. The enhancement effect was truly powerful. And finally, the vengeful beast appeared. The griffin climbed upwards. Its target was the little bastard that interrupted his hunt. The damn bastard who put a piece of disgusting salt in his beak. Griffin felt incredible anger toward the Da-un. He almost had the opportunity to take revenge on the bastard. That's when a rabbit appeared just before Griffin's eyes, standing on a small wall. The rodent gave the signal to fire. Momentarily, an avalanche of arrows buried the griffin and the beast began to fall downward. The improved trap did its job. Eventually, the griffin clung to the wall, clinging to the cliff with its massive paws. The beast was tormented by pain it had never felt before, and the paralyzing poison of the arrows made its body go numb, but it couldn't give up yet. His pride would not let him. The white rabbit stood on the cliff looking down. He was tormented by a strange feeling. He felt a bit sad. The shower of boiling oil was the last thing the proud beast saw. This is it for part 5. Comment below with part 6 if you want me to make the next part. Also, share the video with your friends and subscribe so you won't miss any uploads in the future. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you in the next video.